Hi there, my name is Carl, and as you can probably tell, I'm not a native speaker, so please bear with me. I'll try today to give you a short overview of the new game from Menzel of Andor fame, The Legend of Robin Hood, which should come out in English around June of this year. And before we dive into what's in the box, I want to talk about the design goals which Michael Menzel gave out for this product. And what he wanted was as unobstructed as possible view of the artwork, which is also by him. The same is true for Andor, by the way. And he wanted a narrative-driven game, which is very easy and fast to set up and play. You will get a campaign in this, which should net you for the first playthrough around 10-ish hours, probably a bit shorter, perhaps a bit longer. Depends on how often you have to, well, I don't want to say repeat some stuff, but I'll get into that later. But this is not just for one run through. I will explain that later too. So without much further ado, we will go to an overview of what's in the box and how the game is played. And here we go. Let's have a look inside. You will find on first glance this step-by-step introduction, which is designed to bring you into playing the game within a few minutes, and it accomplishes that goal. There is a quick explanation of how the movement rules work, which I'll cover at a later time. And also this, not a rulebook too. This is a reference sheet where you can look up the different actions the game allows you to do when you want to reference it again, because the rules themselves are explained within a book, which you will be seeing in a few seconds, and you don't want to riffle through the pages of the book all the time to find how this thing with the guards worked or whatever. So this is a nice handy tool to look that up. And here we have the player board. Doesn't look like it at the moment, but you'll see soon. Here is the artwork. Don't try to see too much here. I'll show you the whole thing in just a moment. Here we have the heart of the game. It's the adventure book, which not only has all the story and things for you to find and look out for, but will also teach you the rules while you go. And you'll get new mechanics to incorporate into the game for the first handful of scenarios. So you should see most of the mechanics around scenario 4. And later then on the second run through, which I will cover at the end of this overview, there will be a bunch of new mechanics too, which will make the game a lot more of a game. The last thing you'll find in here is this nice little bag, and you can hear there's a lot of stuff in here. This is all the game pieces which this game comes with, and this is all you'll need to play. We'll have a little peek inside. It's not a very big opening. There's a lot of different stuff here, and I can already see the horror on your faces. Oh God, I have to sort all this stuff out into neat little piles later on. Nope, you will not have to. And here we have the assembled game board. And as you can see, there really is not much obstruction of the artwork. There are a few things here and there. Here's a track for hope, which will be important later on. And also you can see there's a lot of tiles here which can be flipped, each with its own number. The different tiles have different meanings here, and they can have up to 3 states, so to speak. Which state they will be in is depending on which scenario you play, what you may have done in earlier scenarios of the campaign. So there could be some stuff you have activated which will be on the game board for the remainder of the campaign. And there will be things that will be flipped during the scenario depending on what you do. And as I said, up to 3 states. I'll just demonstrate on something that is absolutely not a spoiler. There are guards on this map on different places, for example here, and it can be like this where there's no guard. And it can be flipped. Then there is a guard here which will cover this meadow here. And also, as you can see, beneath it is a little symbol that tells us if we succeed in defeating the guard, then we will get 1 hope for the people, which will be necessary to succeed in every scenario. We have the game board set up here, and what else do we have to do? Other pieces have question marks, and depending on the scenario, if you explore these tiles, you will take this book. The page number is corresponding to the number of the tile. You can only explore it if there's a question mark. And on the page, let's take this trailer, for example, which is page 100. There usually will be an overview of the scenario. This isn't a spoiler. You will see this in your first scenario as you explore your first tile with a question mark. So you already see there are this many scenarios and it splits up. So there is a certain replay value in that too. You see, okay, we are playing the first scenario, the escape, and it tells you the next page where you have to go to. You find a bit of flavor text as well as a choice for what do you want to ask for at this trailer. And depending on what your choice is, there will be different answers to this and different outcomes, which will lead further into the scenario or may give you a helpful tool for fulfilling that scenario. But we weren't finished with the setup of the game. And you remember this nice little bag with a lot of different pieces in it, which you already dread to having to sort. Well, we will now finish setting the game up. We'll take the box, we'll do this. I'm very sorry for your eardrums. And we are essentially done. What we will now do is our players, depending on how many we are, will take their responding player colors. One person has to play as Robin Hood, so we will take him, for example. So this is his stuff. This is what you will need for moving. The other player choices also have these pieces. After you've decided which characters you want to play, everyone sets this up before him. And for every player that takes place, we will take his player token. We will take Robin Hood and Little John for this demonstration. Also, you will always add a red token, which will trigger movements of the guard and other scenario-based stuff. Later on, you will add even further tokens. For example, these two. This means that every player gets a turn at once, and you can decide in which order. And in this case, one player of your choice can take another turn. Now, you will also add a few of these purple cubes, which we'll get in here, and you will add a few white cubes. How many depends on the scenario, and while you are playing said scenario, you will also add more of both. For which these are for, I will cover that later. Now, after you've set up, everyone has taken his movement tokens. We've got the white and purple cubes in here, as well as the player and red token. We will start the scenario. And we do this by one player going in here, looking for one of these nifty little pieces, drawing it out, and here we go. Now Little John will take his first turn. For the purpose of this demonstration, we'll say that Little John starts here at the edge of Sherwood Forest, and we want to talk to this strange fellow that hides near the castle walls. So to move, we will put these here, and look, how can we get there? We can use all three. For example, like this, to get as far as we can, or we can use one less, move a little bit slower, but in exchange, we can add one white cube to the bag, which we will do now. Why is this important? Because the purple and the white cubes are very important for our probes, or let's call it skill checks, which we'll make a lot of over the course of the game. After we are satisfied by our movement, we will place the second player miniature, take the others away, and after this movement, we now can take a player action. Which one depends on where we are and what we touch. You can explore a tile with a question mark if your miniature touches it. And I've already told you how this works, so we will skip that part. Let's pretend now we are here hiding in the shadows and watching the guard at the foot of the wall, and we want to strike them down. For this, we will look if we can move there, then put our figures so that we touch the guard, take the other stuff away, and now we will do our first skill check. These skill checks are used throughout the game for a lot of different purposes, but they work all essentially the same, only with slight modifications. If Little John wants to defeat this guard, he has 3 pulls from the back to take out cubes. You do this one after the other, and our first cube is a white one. We needed at least one white cube to succeed. After pulling this one out, it does go back in the box. After we have done that, the guard is flipped and a timer token is added, so we know that when the guard would usually return, instead we take this token away, so the guard stays hidden. And as you have seen, I didn't put the white cube back in. This goes for all cubes you pull out. So if you pull a purple cube, it also does not go back into the bag. This is important because it always changes the odds of you succeeding or failing. You stop pulling immediately after you succeed. So you don't want to pull the white cubes right away, but ideally you'll pull out 2 purple cubes before pulling your white cube. So for the next challenge, you have that much better odds to succeed. There are many different ways to add white cubes. It can depend on who you talk to, if you don't use as much movement, which will also mean that you're slower in completing the goals of the game, which, as you can imagine, you have to do in a certain amount of time. So, which basic actions are there? You have already seen me defeating a guard. Also, you have seen exploring a question mark tile, and that covers most of it. So you have seen now how to defeat a guard, which is essentially also how you rob a nobleman, and you have seen how to explore a tile with a question mark. And those 2 are the essential actions you will do in this game for most of the time. There are some smaller other things you can do. For example, your characters can exchange items they have found or taken from the nobleman. And at a later time, you will also have certain special actions that your characters can perform. Also, if you fight against guards, you can do so from a distance after a certain point in time. Now you have the general gist of how the game plays, but I see you're asking me if this is everything. That isn't much of a game. Well, you would be correct, but there's several more things we have to cover. For instance, there are these timer tokens, which will be here on this book. And every time all the activation tokens, I'll call them, so these nifty little things are taken out, we finish a complete round. And they wander back in. But this means for every time your player tokens are pulled out of this bag, at some point the red one will show up. And the red one will have several effects. For the first 1 or 2 scenarios, you will reference the book, and the book will tell you exactly which guards show up, which guards go away, and so on. After that, from scenario 3 and on, when you pull this red token, several things happen. First, you'll pull these little seals also out of the bag. Just imagine that these are not up there at the start of the game. These seal tokens will also be in the bag, and you will pull those out when the red token is pulled. There's a lot of pulling out of the bag in this game. And here you see these numbers on here. And these numbers are corresponding to the position of the guards and of the nobleman. So what happens now is you'll look for these numbers and flip them on the game board. We will not do exactly those I have pulled out, but for demonstration purposes, we'll say this guard here comes out, and this nobleman next to it also pops out. This could happen all over the map. You don't really know which. There are several different combinations, also some special effects which can be on here, and also some other things could be activated which I won't show because you want to discover this for yourself. After you have flipped all these tiles, you'll check if any of your player characters shares a meadow with one of the guards which are now seen on the game board. And with meadow, I mean the part that is in sunlight. So if I would be here with Little John would now be captured by the guard, pulled over here, taken into custody, which we will show by putting him down. And this also has the added effect that our hope meter is going down by a certain amount. Let's say by 2. And this is very important because also when we have the red player token in action, we will take one of these timers and they go out of the game. If there are no more timers on here, we fail the scenario and have to start over again, but not just in repeating this scenario. I'll cover that later. If your hope has reached 0 because you were taken into custody too often, or some other game effect or scenario part has reduced your hope, then another one of these will be taken out of the game. So you lose 2 turns instead of 1. You don't want that. Now the question is, how do I get hope? Well, hope can be gotten in several different ways. There can be optional goals in a scenario that you have to fulfill, which will give you hope. Also, defeating a guard will give you 1 hope, as is shown by the symbol under every guard. And if you defeat a nobleman, so you rob him, then you will get 2 hope and an item. So these items, also this nobleman will then get a timeout. So if he would return when you pull out the next seal from the bag, then he will just not come out. Instead, his timer will be removed, just like the guards. While you can shoot at guards, you can't shoot at noblemen. You have to rob them with hand-to-hand combat, so to speak. Now, the items are another thing which we want to cover, and for this we will move this a little bit. As you can see here, for the first time in a scenario, you have a little reminder how all this stuff works, how moving works, and how moving gives you your white cubes you want for succeeding in skill checks. Also, that you can take these 2 actions. And for the first scenario, there are 3 items you can get, which is a rope, a sword, and a horn. The items are also all shown here, so you can always look up what an item does in the book. You see there are a lot more items. That's because after your first scenario, when the noblemen get added, for instance, you will pull this out, change it, and it has 2 stars. 2 stars means it will stay this way throughout the campaign. And then you have all the available items for the scenarios. And if your character gets one of these items, either by exploring one of the villagers who will help you out by giving you something, or by robbing one of the noblemen, you'll take a cube in your player color and put it on there. For example, if you have the bow, you can shoot at guards from a range. This will stay in your possession. Other items like the bag of gold or food will be one use only. After you have used it, you'll take your, I'll call it a property token, off and put it back into the box. And while we are here looking at the items, you have probably seen this little Roman 1 here. This shows you how your scenario is played. Every scenario has 2 versions. Scenario version 1, which you'll play when you take it on for the first time, or you can switch this to 2, which usually happens when you have lost a scenario, so you ran out of time and had the evil end, so to speak, the bad ending, and have to repeat the scenario. What now happens is that in this book, for most of the scenarios, and as this is in German, I have not much fear of spoiling you by showing you some random page. You can see this is for one of the exploratory tokens, one of the question marks, and we have a Roman 1 and a Roman 2. And depending on what is here, you read either this one or that one, and they will be different. So if you fail a scenario and have to replay it, you won't replay it with knowing everything. Instead, certain things will be moved around, the characters will act in another way, and you may find different items in different places, which is a very nifty thing, which the game also uses in its plus mode, which I'll talk about at a later point. And that is essentially it. That's how you play the Legend of Robin Hood. This may sound as if it's not that much, but you can believe me, there will be a lot of decisions for you to make, because where guards show up, or where certain quest objectives show up, and where the noblemen show up is different in every game. You will, for most of the scenarios, pull these seal tokens out at the start of the scenario to define the state of the board at the beginning. So already there are different things which you have to contend with, which will change every time you play. And also, you have a very open-ended start. You have a single objective, usually, but you do not know how to fulfill it. For example, in the first scenario, the escape, you will have Little John here, which is about to be hanged, and Robin Hood is here somewhere in Sherwood Forest. And now the objective is that you have to rescue Little John. So Little John has to try to get out of the castle, and Robin Hood has to try to reach him in the shadow of the wall. How do you get out of there? You do not know. The map, as it is, doesn't have any openings to go through for your character. This gate is closed. There's nothing else in the map. How do you do it? You start by exploring and looking what things you get. For example, in this case, you'll be here at the gallows, which has a question mark, so you can explore it and go from there. Also, in the first scenario, naturally, there would be a guard here, which you can try to take out. The game does get progressively harder, and it also has a plus mode, which you unlock after finishing the game for the first time. In the plus mode, the game becomes even more of a game, so to speak, as you will again play essentially the same story, but it's again not exactly the same scenarios, because they will now be a mix of the tidbits from version 1 and version 2 of a scenario, which get intertwined and switch between. Also, there will be new rules for what happens if you defeat guards, which makes it harder to just beat up noblemen and guards, to get the hope up, get the items, and just proceed through the story. And you will also get more possible items with special effects, which will help you on your quest, which also will be sorely needed for the challenge that is plus mode. So this is how you play The Legend of Robin Hood, and I'll give you some final thoughts right now. Don't be deceived by the apparent lack of actions you can take. The combination of moving over the board, having to decide where to go, what to explore, how to split up, combined with the time pressure, will have you on your toes. And while it's easy to pick up and very easy to get into the rules, doesn't mean that it's an easy game where you will succeed without trying. Especially later on, it can get quite a bit harder, especially regarding the time pressure you have. And in New Game Plus, there will be a lot more of things you have to juggle. Don't forget the items, which have quite an impact, and where you also have to decide when to get them, how to get them. Do you have the time to take out that noble with the cloak so you can stealth through the village without being noticed by the guards, for example? So quite a lot to do, and I can only recommend this game. It's a lot of fun. You can play it with a wide variety of people, which is always great for a game. And I hope you can start enjoying this game in June of this year. So I think we have reached the end of this meandering of mine through the English language. I thank you for watching and wünsche euch noch einen guten Tag.